Welcome to Perspectives in Peds, or PIP for short, your go-to podcast for insights into paediatric practice. From clinical approaches and emerging research to the everyday wins and challenges, we bring you OT perspectives that inform, inspire and spark conversation. Hi Liz. Hi Gabs. Welcome back to PIP.
Yay.
Thanks for having us.
We're back.
You're
We're
so
here.
welcome. We're excited. We're talking about emotions.
Talking
Really had to think about that. We're not talking about emotions. We're talking about talking about emotions.
Nice.
Which I know both of you were really keen to join me on this
I love
episode.
talking about emotions.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah. And
I
we're
have a lot of them. I have a lot of emotions.
I feel the feels.
Me
We're
too.
big empaths here. So we're going to kickstart with, I suppose, thinking about some consistent language or what we're actually talking about when we're talking about emotions.
For
So,
sure.
and this isn't you do not need to give me a technical definition, but when we're thinking about the word emotions, what pops into your brain?
Emotions, I think, is a word that we use that society's kind of given to describe something that's quite individual, which is the feelings, the way our body tells us that we've had like a change of state inside our body.
Yeah.
I often use the word sensations. I feel like sensation can be very different for lots of people, but we have, only a few collection of emotion words.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of pair your sensation and, be able to best as you can link it to the emotion, the word, is really helpful.
Especially when you think about, I know recently for one of my sessions, I had a look at an emotions wheel and how complex they can get with the interchangeable words, but they're still slightly different. When you look at joy and happy and so thinking about internal sensations can be really helpful as well.
For sure, where emotions are like a collective of sensations that typically align with the word, but sometimes not.
Yeah. And we know that when we're thinking about the collection of physiological symptoms or signals that we're experiencing, we're also learning as we get older to think about the context of which we're in.
That's true.
And what that means for those things, because a lot of those sensations can carry across a lot of different emotional states.
I love
us
that
too.
today's about talking about emotions, and we
Yes.
start with the most complicated way
Yes,
of talking about
sorry.
emotions. It is so tricky. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I think we touched on it just before. We've put words to these things that are blobby and immaterial and complex and are different. There are places in the world where whole emotions don't exist. Like a word for that emotion does not exist. And I'm from Brazil, and there's a word that we use that literally means the feeling to miss something. It's that feeling that you get when you miss something.
That's so cute.
Which is really, really sweet. And it doesn't have it in English, But my point is, it's hard to explain.
Yes.
They're hard things to explain.
But as clinicians, we need to remember that for families, because they do come in with goals around their child learning to maybe talk about emotions or label emotions or regulate emotions or whatever it might be. And yes, I think emotions get more complicated or complex as we age and experience more. But we do still need to remember that young humans are still humans with lots of different emotional states
For
as
sure.
well, and it's complex for them too.
And it's our job to simplify it enough while still respecting the fact that it's individual.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if we can't simplify it, if we can't make it bite-sized, we can't chew it, we can't digest it and understand it, we're not doing anyone any service if emotions stay these big complex things like we just mentioned.
Yeah. So if we're thinking about talking about emotions
Yeah.
or teaching kids to talk about emotions as well, what have you each noticed in your practice around how kids learn to talk about emotions?
Sometimes I'm impressed, but more often than not, I find it tricky, almost helping kids to unlearn sometimes what they've learned about emotions. Sometimes, red and green are very much used for good and bad kind of emotions. And we're probably going to touch on this a little bit later, but I like to redirect them to thinking about more comfortable and uncomfortable, because we don't want to label things as good and things as bad. I guess there's just expected and unexpected times to kind of feel those things. So I find depending on the age. There may be some sound understanding, but sometimes they do use terminology or language that maybe isn't as affirming or as, I guess, encompassing as you'd want it to be, I think.
Yeah. What about you, Gabs?
I think, and I want to touch on what Liz said first, that the biggest reason why I also steer clear of like good and bad emotions is that is naturally adding like a level of judgment to emotions. Meaning you will do anything in your power to hold on to emotions that you think are good and everything in your power to avoid at all costs emotions that you think are bad. So starting with your language of good and bad, it's already kind of setting you 3 steps back because suddenly you're living your whole life by going, no, I don't want to feel that. And we already know, like Liz said, there are moments where feeling sad is completely appropriate and teaches you a lot.
Yeah, and I think when you have good and bad, it makes like, I should be here, I should feel this, which as we know from the human experience is just not a thing. It's not reality.
It doesn't really work like that.
No.
I like to use things like pleasant and unpleasant.
That's
you know,
a great one.
I will use comfortable and uncomfortable for younger kids because pleasant and unpleasant. Look, if I can't spell the word on the whiteboard, how many times I'm going to spell unpleasant, you know? It's probably too complicated.
That's true.
But in essence, they're pretty similar, you know? I tend to evolve to pleasant and unpleasant for my teenagers and things like that because the goal here is to feel comfortable in unpleasant emotions. That's where comfortable and uncomfortable start to get a bit messy. But for younger kids, I think comfortable and uncomfortable is like a bang on word. I also use like high energy and low energy. That some of these emotions are high energy, so they make your heart go faster and they make you move faster and they feel fast. You know, things that come to mind are things like excited or even angry, where then low energy is our like slower emotions. I have to be really careful not to say calmer because that's an emotion on its own.
That's true.
Things like tired, and one that I love to use is like cozy, you know, which happens to be pleasant and slow.
I like that.
Love that one. That's a sweet one.
So it sounds like the role of the adult in the child's life would be quite an important one in terms of shaping how we talk about emotions. I know for me, I've had families in the past where certain emotions obviously carry some kind of negative stigma for them as individuals. I do recall having conversations around anxiety, for example, and I had a parent once sort of like whisper like, oh, we don't use that word, which is really interesting because our kids only learn from the grown-ups around them, really. So what do we think of when we think of that role of adults and how powerful it can be or how unhelpful sometimes it can be when we're learning to talk about emotions?
For sure.
I love that example that you gave where it was almost like by not using the word anxiety, it's maybe even be inflicting more fear or more worry around this particular experience. And I think the modeling of parents, obviously, and the caregivers, anyone that may be in the young person's life, is really crucial to be able to kind of, you know, express what they are feeling, potentially even reflect. I feel like the power of reflection with emotional regulation or just talking about emotions is reflecting and say, hey, you know, the other day I was feeling this particular way and it made me do this. Like it's helping to model what we want the kids to eventually be able to do, I think, as well. So modeling's a big one.
For sure.
On
Hopefully
that as
positively.
well, it's like as I'm taking kind of my clinician hat off and more as a parent now.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I've got a kid, but I often think about that when kids, firstly, I think a lot of parents don't often show that vulnerable side of their emotional state to their kids. They might try and hide it if they're angry or upset or sad or that kind of thing. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm crying around my children all the time, but
it's a tricky balance.
it is. But I do try to show that I do feel sadness and frustration and that kind of thing. And my twins are nearly 3.5, and they will at times like see me get a bit teary and they'll be like, oh, Mum, are you sad? And I will actually like reflect and be like, I am sad. I think it's also because I'm feeling really tired.
Killer.
And
nice one.
I think that's really important, as the role of adults is not just to role model talking about comfortable or pleasant emotions as well, and really showing that all emotions are normal and we all feel
for sure
emotions.
Absolutely. You know, I ultimately, as like therapists, I find our job is to role model to parents. You know, the way it's kind of like a mantra per se, but it's also how I talk to parents about it, is that our job here is not to stop young people from feeling that emotion. Our job is to actually create opportunities, support them to feel that emotion, just not alone. You know, it can feel so much more okay to feel an unpleasant or uncomfortable emotion with someone else.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think you touched on it fantastically, Katie, that our job is not to then feel that emotion with them. That's not really what, you know, the job is, but that the work that you put in is actually about helping organize how that feeling is, like labeling it, understanding it deeper and validating it, while also role modeling the kind of like calm, regulated side of things.
Yeah. What are some ways that you might have seen parents, and I use this word very powerfully here, unintentionally, I guess, not validate an emotional experience for a child? Because often parents don't realize until you don't know what you don't know until you've been supported to learn how to talk about emotions.
Look, one of my favorite conversations I have with parents, and it takes a while to get there. So as a therapist, I do a lot of work on the rapport building side, because it's a vulnerable space. We're talking about emotions. I actually can't think of much more vulnerability than talking about emotions. Is helping parents understand that it's, how do I put this? Sometimes you might feel that your child's emotions actually are a reflection on your job as a parent, you know? So suddenly letting a young person feel sad means that you have not done something right.
Yeah.
You know? But it's actually quite the polar opposite. The more your kids feel, or the more your clients feel, the more kind of evidence that they're becoming a young person and then an older person who has a grasp on their emotions. You know, often when emotions are squashed and like hidden away, what happens are like what we call more like maladaptive. It's like, what can I do to not feel that? That's when we see things like big explosions. You know, they're forms of communication, but they're also forms of discomfort. Like, whatever I'm feeling, I need to get rid of it. I explain to other therapists, schools, and parents that things like hitting, you know, and punching and pushing, even all the way up to the AFL, which is really topical, you know, the grand final, I think, is this weekend for those listening. Those young people and adults don't punch and hit because they're angry. They punch and hit because they're not comfortable feeling angry. They do something to try offload that anger. And sometimes that means hitting and hurting someone, you know? So I think it's about understanding that it's not a reflection on yourself.
Yes.
That's
and I
really
think
big one.
It's not the parent's responsibility to fix the situation. And I think sometimes parents can jump to the fixing sides of things because they're not comfortable with that emotion perhaps themselves. So instead of sitting and being able to co-regulate and be quite calm and help the child talk about their emotions and talk through things, they may jump to, but have you tried this? Let's just do this tomorrow. Let's kind of almost like redirect and, you know, put a Band-Aid on the situation and not let the child fully experience that emotion, perhaps because it's uncomfortable for the caregiver themselves.
Yeah. How we see that, you know, things like Liz just mentioned, maybe, you know, rushing to a strategy too quickly.
Yep.
That's true.
Skipping feeling, going straight to logic.
Yep.
You know, like what can we do to feel better instead of spending time actually understanding the feeling a bit more.
You're feeling really sad right now.
For sure.
Full stop.
Leaning into those like distraction or like thought shifting strategies far too often. And sometimes there's a place for it. Like we're talking survival and you just need to get to grocery stores. You just need your Cocoa Pops and go home, you know? But if you only do that, you're actually limiting opportunities to feel an emotion safely with support.
Yeah, I've absolutely like experienced that in my life around like parenting, around watching the important adults in my twins' life, like how they respond to their classic when they were 2. They're very big responses to very, very small problems, big in their eyes. But it's so interesting to watch how like some will sit with the emotion and some will be like, oh, distraction, like come over here, look what I've got.
Yeah.
And, or you're okay, it's okay.
You're okay, it's okay. It's a classic.
That's a real one.
You're fine. And these are all, like we said earlier, really unintentional ways that we might shut down an emotion. But
for sure.
Supporting adults in a child's life to learn to sit with that emotion and just...
I think you can notice as well, perhaps like in an intake or when you are talking about emotional regulation goals, often I find that parents may jump to, can we make a goal around my child being able to regulate? And we kind of know, we were talking about it earlier around kind of the framework of being like a ruler, the ruler of your emotions. We're not starting so much at regulate. We need to kind of start at the being able to notice the changes in sensations that we spoke about.
And ruler was a acronym.
Yeah. Mark
Yes.
Brackett.
Yes.
I believe it's Permission to Feel is the book that he has. Great book. Really good book.
Yeah. So the parents may come in wanting the child to be able to regulate, which is your final R of ruler. But your first R is being able to recognize that there is changes in sensations of my body and in other people as well. And then your U for ruler, U is being able to understand what that might be, whether it's pleasant, whether it's unpleasant, and also have like an understanding of, I guess, the labels of the emotions before you label them as well.
Yeah, it's like the body clues. Essentially, it's like understanding what is it that, you know, anger is for me here. Like my palms get really sweaty. You know, what anger here means this for me, understanding it deeper.
Definitely.
Continue.
Yeah. And then L
I'm riveted. I'm waiting for it. I love this stuff.
And L is like the labeling. So the ability to actually label the emotion. So connecting, I guess, your body clue, perhaps even your thought to a word, one of these societal words that is out there and we see them everywhere, being able to kind of link that so that we can get.
On that note, it's about also labeling diverse words.
Yes.
You know, it can be incredibly powerful to find the difference between jealous and disappointed. And I love jealous and disappointed because I hate feeling jealous. I find it really hard. But if you ask me if I'm okay feeling disappointed, I'd be like, yeah, it's part of it. It's part of life. It's the game. You know, you do what you got to do. But jealousy and disappointed for me feel really similar. I'm often jealous and disappointed that I didn't get something almost at the same time.
Trying to pull them apart.
But the strategies I do for each of them, when I'm disappointed, I give myself some time. When I'm jealous, I actually go to that person. I like try to talk to them about how I am happy.
You're really good at that.
I do it. I get jealous a lot, everyone. I'm outing myself here in my own workplace. But I'll talk about feeling jealous, you know, that I'm happy for them, but I'm also wish I got that too.
And two things can be true.
Exactly.
But on the note of ruler, it's about labeling it more than just happy, sad, you know, angry, scared, whatever the 4 basic ones are.
So when we're talking about emotions as adults
and as teenagers, like they're actually finding, I think there's some evidence in there that most adults can only label confidently like 6 emotions.
Wow.
Or it's some, don't quote me on that, it's some low number. It's not a very big number. And that you'll ask them, can you tell me the difference between these two? And they'll give you some sort of definition. But how it feels is all blobbed together, you know, and they're actually really big different feelings. They're also finding that young kids as early as like 8, 9, can actually start learning a really broad range of words.
Yeah.
And that using those words makes a huge difference in their regulation day to day.
Yeah.
Going back to what we were speaking about with parents, like unintentionally not validating the child's experience of emotions, I think we see in every situation that we walk into socially, everybody says, hey, how are you? We definitely do that in Australia anyway. And the response is often, fine, I'm good, how are you? There's not much. You're not going to, tell your secrets and your actual emotions to the checkout person at
Unless
Kmart.
It's phrased as how are you really doing?
That's the thing. And it's like, I think maybe kids get home from school, they get into the car and mum and dad go, how was your day? And the kids go, good. And then we kind of move on to the next sorts of things. This is what we're doing now. We've got footy training, then we're going to have dinner. And I think we may be doing our kids a disservice by almost just asking, how are you? Or how was your day? And then them just giving like that basic answer that we all give, but not truly giving them the time to say, how was
I'm
it
interested
today?
to know then, Liz, like if you were working with a family, like what are some scripts or questions or things you might actually start steering parents or caregivers towards instead of how was your day or how are you?
I have
and
3.
therapists as well, actually.
Yes.
Once again, asking for a friend.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I have 3 that I do confidently recommend, and I often do that sandwiching effect where you might ask, a more 2 comfortables on either side of your sandwich and a more uncomfortable one in the middle. So the first one is, what was something that you enjoyed perhaps at school today? What was something that you enjoyed today? Giving the child the opportunity to be able to kind of reflect and then, extending on that and talking a bit more about the emotions. What was something that you found hard today? Because often when we're doing things day to day and we find it tricky, we can often, look inwards and judge ourselves potentially. So talking about that. And what was something that I did well today often does, gives, space to express kind of, that's a really hard one, I think, as well. Complimenting ourselves or acknowledging that's what we've done is really tricky too. So
I'll probably approach with a bit more of like an older, like a teenager kind of lens. I think even before scripts, I look at kind of the multimodal side of things, like texts, voice messages, like
that.
videos, notes, writing it down, emojis. I love Emoji Kitchen. Google it. It's self-explanatory. It's fantastic. It can be really powerful to like actually not have to do it face to face, especially as you're just getting to it. To match with that, it's about checking in with yourself and be really sure that you're genuinely curious, that you're not just doing this for, the goal of like regulating. It only works if you actually really want to know how your young person feels. For the therapist as well, very often we see so many kids in a day, 6 kids, 7 kids. It's really important that when we ask, how are you, that we're actually genuinely curious. It's really important. In terms of scripts and things like that, I tend to look at, you guys might have actually heard me say it, I'll ask a question, and then if it's not received, if there's no response or like, it's all right, I'll actually ask if they want me to make the question smaller. I'll literally say, do you want me to make this question smaller? And then it becomes like, how was your day, to tell me about your morning. And then how was your morning can become even smaller to, what did you do for breakfast? There are emotions all the time. You're never not feeling something. If I'm eating Cheerios, I'm going to be feeling okay. If I'm eating Nutella mixed in with like crunchy nut flakes, I'll be like, this is the best morning ever. I'm going to feel
Cheerios
fantastic. Okay. Look, it's not chocolate covered crunchy nut, but it is what it is. We are always feeling something, so you don't actually have to look for these big expressions of emotions to get insight and to talk about emotions.
That's so
they
true.
can be like somewhere quite mundane, quite for lack of a better word, small.
I also like, just coming back to when you were speaking around like text or voice memos or something, I think supporting your families to also learn about your child's communication preferences, because
Great one.
I know that we are talking about emotions, but that's, I guess, got a caveat on it that some young people might do better if they're communicating with like drawing about their emotional experience.
For sure.
They might think about emotions more related to colors or I think it's also really taking that individualized approach there around what works for your child.
And something I love, sorry Liz, something I absolutely love is actually recommending for example, journaling is a fantastic tool, but journaling can be really daunting. Recommending purchasing, and I'm actually in the process of like drawing my own. Don't keep an eye on this space. Like emotion stickers that you can kind of stick on the top of your page for how you're feeling that day. Beautiful. You can do 4, 5, 6 about the big emotions that you did experience. You know, it can be incredibly rewarding as a parent and as a therapist to give those stickers to a child and see them use it. Like that is still communicating and talking about emotions. That is still thinking about emotions. It still counts. It's all there. Yeah. Sorry, Liz, you go.
That's okay. We didn't touch on the E part of the ruler, and I think you guys have done a fabulous job.
Back on track. We're back on track.
Thank you. And I often say...
I'm feeling embarrassed for it.
I often say I do not mind how a child expresses their emotions to me. It just, like you were saying, I want it to be as aligned with their social preferences as possible. So we also recommend occasionally the How We Feel app, which is also
it is cool.
Professor Mark Brackett who came up with the ruler framework. So that's a really lovely one that perhaps I would use it more with teens because it does have a huge range of different emotions, and it does use the terminology that Gabs mentioned of pleasant, unpleasant, high energy, low energy, those sorts of things. But yeah, I think brainstorming with the family ways to have these conversations, like maybe it's an app check-in and then we're going to talk about the emotion kind of afterwards as well. Setting them up for success and making it a part of their routine, their day-to-day routine as much as possible, I find is quite helpful too.
I love the ruler framework because it has to summarize your R, which is recognize, your U, which is understand, your L, which is label, your E is express, and your R is regulate, which, spoilers, Liz didn't get to regulate yet. But essentially, there is so much before your express and your regulate. You have your recognize, understand, and label. And so often, and going back to unintentionally, our aims of these conversations is to regulate our kids or the kids we work with's emotions without doing the rest. Like I said earlier, kids have either a conscious or subconscious radar, for lack of a better word, like bullshit. They know when you don't really care about their emotion, but you just want them to feel better. You have to go in genuinely curious, genuinely wanting to understand, genuinely wanting them to understand. With that in mind, that will you will go lengths, that will guide you. So I guess in terms of scripts and validating, it's about checking with yourself about your curiosity and using language such as tell me more, or why is it that this made you feel this way? Or if they're not even able to label it, I tend to use things like, you said you were feeling, tell me about, what is, is it different to meh? I got meh. It's actually really validating to ask more. So using some of those probing questions.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I as a parent of two young toddlers, I do a lot of talking about emotions at home. But I'm often faced with the if one of my girls is yelling or kicks a toy or something, I'll be like, oh man, I can see you're really angry right now. And one of my girls, Riley will often reply with, I'm not angry, I'm sad.
Oh, those are some good emotional literacy skills there, Katie. You should be really proud.
But it's also, I'm like, oh, are you? I was confused because your body was telling me otherwise. But asking those follow-up questions around why did it make you feel sad then? And it's navigating that they're still trying to figure out what the words mean for them as well and that kind of thing. So
I feel like I want to add an extra R. This is so controversial. Add an extra R to ruler and have
Professor
at the
Mark
end,
Brackett on the phone right now.
Yeah, I think I should. The last R being regulate and the one after that is reflect.
Love it.
Both for the caregivers and for the kids. So I will get Mark Brackett on the phone and see what we can do about that. But I think the power of reflection is extremely important for the caregiver in terms of like, how did I go talking about that emotion, sitting here, being present, co-regulating those sorts of things? Did I give them enough time to run all the way through their ruler before fixing or helping or recommending a strategy? And also then having dialogue with the child around, you know, this happened yesterday, let's reflect on it. You know, once the dust has all settled and we're all calm and regulated.
Sometimes it's really hard to talk about emotions when the emotion is
yes, definitely.
Absolutely. You know, and I, you know, cannot, how do I say this? Recommend this enough that if you want to talk about emotions, you got to aim for the whole spectrum. You can't just talk about the comfy ones. And you, funnily enough, often therapists and parents lean towards only talking about the uncomfortable, unpleasant ones because they're the ones that feel more obvious. The rest kind of get jumped into this bucket of like, they're doing all right.
Yeah, fine.
When they're not doing all right, it's like you really hyper focus on, is it sad, angry? Are they annoyed? You know, why are they disappointed? It can be really tiring to only have those conversations, you know? So a good place to start is actually the opposite and lean towards going like, well, I can see you're really excited today. I can see you're really happy today, especially with teenagers. It is so much easier to talk about like, why were you so pumped after soccer? What happened at soccer? Rather than, why were you so disappointed at soccer?
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, cool. Well, I am going to wrap us up because I think we could talk about it forever.
Ever and ever.
But I suppose like some key takeaways from you guys. So, for clinicians listening and they're like, oh, yeah, I want to kind of start doing this more, supporting caregivers to do this. I think some of the things that I've heard in this conversation is figuring out how you talk about emotions yourself in terms of pleasant, unpleasant, comfortable, uncomfortable, something that resonates with yourself but also with the client that you're working with.
And I want to put a challenge, a formal challenge out there to like therapists and parents alike. Have a go at the How We Feel app. Give yourself 2 weeks and experience how tricky it is to actually accurately document what emotion you're feeling.
The labeling is so challenging for me personally.
You'll be surprised. Oh, sorry, you go.
I was going to say, like, when I sit down and go, like, what's going on internally for me? What sensations? Like, I can pinpoint those quickly. Think about the context, but I'm like, the word.
For sure. With the caveat that, you know, reflecting on your own emotions can be really hard if you're having a really hard time in your life. So obviously take care of yourself. But it can be a really interesting and insightful journey to suddenly go, I can't believe I've been asking my kids to do this and I can barely do this. I've got 30, 40 years experience on them and I can barely wrap my head around what I'm feeling. Yet I've been asking this young person to do it in session and then do the work I've asked them to do. You know, how tricky. Really easy to empathize at that point. It's a reality check. Yikes.
For takeaway points, I think for clinicians, I think one of the big things that I have learnt is being able to support the parents to reflect on what are the emotions that they are comfortable with talking about, I guess, and the ones perhaps they are less comfortable talking about, so that they are aware of their internal sensations and emotional state when their child comes to them, kind of on that circle being like, I need help to organize this emotion. How do they themselves go organizing it for themselves? And I think just expressing the importance of talking about them, whether it's in the moment if there's capacity to, but also the reflection, the extra R as well.
I think as well, obviously this is an individual process for all clinicians, but using like the power of using your therapeutic self as well and being able to be vulnerable and talk about your emotions. I think as a clinician, we always have to kind of work on that. If we're hoping to model this for families to then work on at home, obviously use your discretion around how vulnerable you might be and that kind of thing. But I mean, whenever I've used my own vulnerability as a therapeutic tool, it's only been helpful.
For sure. I guess a really practical takeaway is actually starting to openly, put words to the emotions you're feeling with your clients and your the young people you work with. Coming in and saying, like, I will often say, like, I'm feeling a bit tired, but actually really, like, excited.
Yeah.
I'm feeling worried and, like, ready for a rest, like, a bit sleepy.
Yeah. It's really important to show that to parents because it's not a natural,
It's
like,
not.
as a grown-up, it feels weird to talk about your emotions like that at such a high rate throughout your day if you're trying to do it for your child.
For sure.
So for parents to see clinicians doing that is huge.
On a more broad, like less tangible, less practical note, I think one thing, if I could encourage both, any adult working with a young person, is to remember that emotions are hard for yourselves. Imagine not even knowing what's going on. Like, imagine being a young person having just as many, if not more, emotions. None of the words, none of the prior experiences, and none of the understanding that you could get through it.
They often happen so quickly for young kids.
The example I like to use is, of course, they're having a hard time being bored. They haven't had those 6 opportunities to sit through Centrelink lines. You know what boredom feels like in comparison, but they don't have that.
This
is the most boring thing they've ever felt, potentially. You've waited at Dreamworld, you've waited at Centrelink, you've waited in lines, you've had those experiences to wait through boredom. As just an example, you could do that with all emotions. So remember that it's hard to be a young kid, like a kid. It's hard to be a kid and not know what you're feeling and not knowing what it means and why you're feeling it in the first place. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Great chat.
That was fun.
Thanks for having
We'll
us.
pop the link to the app and the book in the show notes
sure.
as well.
Absolutely.
So definitely check that out. Do Gabs' challenge of using the app.
Yeah, let us know how we go.
Yeah.
I love this stuff. Like, I'd be really keen to know what you guys think of the app. I think it's killer.
Yeah.
And I might get on the phone with Mark Brackett and see what we can do about
about the additional R. And then you can add a G for Gabs.
And put Alyssa's name in the back of the book as well.
Ruler,
watch
reflection, and Gabs.
All right. Well, thanks, Gabs and Liz. We'll see you
Thanks for having
soon.
us.
Bye.
Bye.